Judas Iscariot is undoubtedly one of the most controversial and enigmatic figures in Christian history. His name has become synonymous with betrayal, forever marked as the man who handed Jesus over to the religious leaders in exchange for 30 pieces of silver. But was Judas merely a greedy traitor? Or did he play an essential role in fulfilling a divine plan? To better understand who Judas Iscariot was, we must look beyond the labels and explore the layers of his story, which is both tragic and fascinating. Judas was one of the 12 disciples chosen by Jesus, part of his closest circle. His surname, Iscariot, is commonly associated with his place of origin. Many scholars believe he was from Kerioth, a town in Judea, making him the only non-Galilean disciple. This geographical difference may have influenced his perspective and behavior, as he likely had a distinct worldview compared to the rest of the group. Additionally, Judas was assigned the role of treasurer within Jesus' group, managing the money from donations they received. The Gospels suggest he was dishonest in this role, misappropriating some of the funds for his own use. This detail contributes to shaping the image of Judas as someone vulnerable to corruption. The betrayal of Judas is undoubtedly one of the most dramatic events in the biblical narrative. According to the Gospels, he approached the religious leaders and negotiated the delivery of Jesus for 30 pieces of silver, the equivalent price of a slave at the time. However, Judas' motivations remain a topic of debate. Some interpret his betrayal as an act of pure greed, while others believe he was deeply disillusioned with Jesus. There is evidence to suggest that Judas, like many Jews of his time, expected the Messiah to be a political and military leader, someone who would liberate Israel from Roman rule. When Jesus refused to fulfill these expectations, Judas may have felt that his own ideals had been betrayed. Another possibility, more speculative, is that Judas believed he was helping to accelerate Jesus' plan. Some theologians suggest that Judas did not intend to cause Jesus' death but rather to force a messianic action, compelling Jesus to assume the role of a liberator before the authorities. This interpretation, though less common, demonstrates how Judas can be viewed as a more complex figure rather than simply the villain of the story. The relationship between Judas and the divine plan is another intriguing aspect of his story. During the Last Supper, Jesus stated that one of the disciples would betray him, indicating that the betrayal was already known and, perhaps, inevitable. This detail suggests that Judas played a necessary role in fulfilling the scriptures. If the betrayal was part of the divine plan, did Judas truly have a choice? This question has divided theologians and scholars for centuries. To some, Judas was an instrument of God, essential for the realization of Jesus' sacrifice. To others, he was still accountable for his actions, even if they served a greater purpose. After the betrayal, Judas met a tragic and symbolic end. According to the Gospel of Matthew, he was filled with remorse and tried to return the 30 pieces of silver to the priests, but they refused. In despair, Judas took his own life by hanging. In the book of Acts, however, a different version is presented. Judas is said to have died violently in a field purchased with the blood money. These discrepancies in the biblical accounts reflect how different Christian communities interpreted and transmitted Judas' story over time. Outside the canonical Gospels, the figure of Judas also appears in apocryphal texts. The Gospel of Judas, a Gnostic text discovered in the mid-20th century, presents a radically different perspective. In this text, Judas is portrayed as Jesus' closest disciple, chosen to fulfill the mission of handing him over. According to this view, Judas' betrayal was not an act of disloyalty but an act of obedience to a direct request from Jesus. Although the Gospel of Judas is not considered historically reliable by most scholars, it raises fascinating questions about how Judas was understood in different Christian communities. Judas Iscariot's figure continues to inspire reflection and debate, both in religious and cultural contexts. His story raises universal questions about guilt, remorse, and the possibility of redemption. What would have happened if Judas had lived to witness Jesus' resurrection? Would he have been forgiven? This possibility is explored in many artistic and literary works that imagine an alternative ending for Judas' story. While Judas' role as a traitor is central to the Christian narrative, it also challenges our understanding of free will and divine forgiveness. For many, Judas symbolizes the dangers of greed, disillusionment, and lack of faith. For others, he is a tragic example of how even the darkest choices can be part of a greater purpose. Without Judas, would the crucifixion have occurred? And without the crucifixion, would Christianity have formed as we know it today? These questions highlight how Judas is more than just a betrayer. He is a figure who forces us to confront the complexities of human behavior and the depth of the Christian narrative. In the end, Judas Iscariot reminds us that even those who walk closest to the light can be consumed by darkness. His story is a warning, but also an invitation to reflect on our own choices and the possibility of redemption. Above all, Judas is a deeply human character, flawed, doubtful, and contradictory, yet crucial to the greatest story of redemption ever told. If you liked this video and want to know more about the characters that surrounded the life of Christ and formed the rich biblical story, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and send this video to your friends. Turn on notifications to know when new videos come out.